super excited to be here. This is my first DevCon. I'm super pumped. So my name is Amit. So before we start, the title of this talk was not this when I submitted it. It was something along the lines of why quick start guides suck and how you can write a great one. But as I started working on this talk, I realized that I can give you some actionable stuff that you can actually use to convert those guides into something that developers would love. So I was like, this is how I want to title this. So at the end of this, you will have 6 quick start guide fixes that you will take home. But before we get to that, we need to talk about quick start guides in general. You know those things that are supposed to make us feel like these friendly neighborhood Spider-Man sort of feeling about APIs and SDKs, and you can go in and it can rescue you. You're super excited about something, and they can get you started quickly. But they often turn out to not be that. They turn out to be this guy who is trying to be super helpful. He just woke up from his sleep, and he's super excited about a movie plot that he wants to explain to you, but every word that's coming out of his head is just confusing you even more. So I want you to picture something. It's like stupid o'clock in the morning, and you are finally you've been hearing on X or Twitter about this new API, and you're like, you know what, today, 5 a.m. is the day, I'm gonna do this. You're already 5 cups of coffee loaded in, and you're like, I'm gonna try this out. And you go open up the quick start guide, and it goes something like this. Which is, that guy just woke up, and he's like, I'm gonna help. And this is really not very helpful, and I'm trying to hack something super quick. So again, the promise is that the quick start guides are this magic genius button that can get you from 0 to 1 quickly, but they are really turning out to be instructions written by someone who really hates you. And to be fair, I've been on both sides. I have been on both sides. I have created some guides that question my career choice, my existence on a planet. But I've also consumed a lot of them that have really forced me to pull my hair out. So through all of this time I've spent at Amazon Alexa writing a bunch of these writing tech tutorials, but also as a consumer, I love hacking on things, so I've also consumed a lot of these guides. So I've tried to distill them down into 6 principles, if you may, that I've found that if these guides include those, they make life a lot easier for developers. So without further ado, I present to you the 6 different types of guides I've found. So here's a foggy compass guide. This is like a Christopher Columbus sort of example, where what happens is you get something like this. You get on the quick start guide and it says, welcome to Super API, follow the steps below to get started. Now at the surface, it's like, oh, you know what, it's straightforward. It tells me the steps I can use to get started, but I have no idea what this guide does. It's not clear what I'm going to do, what I'm going to accomplish at the end of this. So contrast that with something like this. In the next 10 minutes, you'll use Super API to build a mini app that takes you dad jokes every morning, get ready to be the funniest person at breakfast. Now, it's very clear what I'm going to do with this. It tells me how much time I'm actually investing in this and what I'm going to get out of this. So there needs to be a clear objective and scope. So, welcome to API, follow the steps, get started. It's not so good, but in the next 5 minutes, you'll send your first API call. That is super appealing to me. I know in 5 minutes I'll get something that's functional, and I can decide if I want to invest further time into this or not. So, the principle number 1 is clear, objective, and scope. The second one is what I call the kitchen sink guide. Now this is, I'm sure we've all seen these. It tries to tell you everything that the API or SDK can do. It overwhelms you with technical jargon. It assumes that you know a lot of this technical jargon, and it tries to cover everything in one go. Now, an example of this would be something like this. It's a shop easy API, and you can create a commerce page, but you can also integrate with chatbots, recommendation engines, and even dynamic pricing. In this guide, we will touch upon all these aspects. And these are the super long guides that just go on until cows come home. And what I really want is, I want them to be broken down into separate guides. So a good example would be, in this guide, we'll walk you through creating a straightforward product page. We'll cover just the images and descriptions. If you're looking to dive into more stuff, we have separate guides for those. So this approach actually does 2 things. One, it doesn't overwhelm the developer, but it also gives you the opportunity for them to go and explore other things that they might be more interested in. So one guide, one objective. And I try to think of it like a good, clean code function. A function should do just one thing. Similarly, a quick start guide should do just one thing. The next one is the dry toast guide. And I like this analogy because it's really how it makes me feel, because it doesn't give me any context. It just launches into the guide. So in this guide, for example, Super API can transcribe audio. All right, that's nice. What do I do with that? It doesn't excite me, it doesn't give me any use cases. But imagine if something like this. Imagine automatically converting your podcast episodes into searchable blog posts with our transcription Super API. Now you've already started my brain cells going, so give me some examples, and this is also good from a sales and marketing point of view because you're pointing developers to the kind of things that are really good use cases of your API. So there's an opportunity to inspire the developers with contextual use cases, so we should absolutely use that to excite them. Next one is the puzzle piece guide. This is like, it happens a lot. The quick start guide will do everything right until it gets to the code part, and you're like, so just paste this code into your project. Where exactly am I pasting this? There's a lot of assumptions the guide is making. It assumes that I know the project structure. It's assuming that I know where the function code goes. So this is something I see a lot. Add this code to your Python project. I have no idea what to do with that. Something like this would be super helpful. The function should ideally go in your utilities.js file under the helper functions. So make it very clear if you can give line numbers, if you're going through a progressive thing, give them line numbers where the code goes. And if there's also like, if there's a project structure that they need to understand, like it's a Rails app and it's going to have like an MVC architecture. If you're not familiar with it, here's how it works. Give them some context for the structure that you have. So clarify code placement and file structure. And the next one is the treasure hunt guide. This is, again, I've seen this happen a lot, is that you do not provide all the assets or resources that the guide actually needs. So imagine that you have something like test using an audio clip. I have no idea where I can get that audio clip, so I'm already bailing out at this point. Also, if there's a specific use case that the audio clip should be doing, you've lost the opportunity. I'm going to go find an audio clip that's on my desktop, but it may not be the best case for the audio transcription API that you're trying to sell. So to make things simpler, here's a sample audio clip that you can use for your initial tests. So include the guide, and it doesn't need to be like everything doesn't need to be like on that guide page, but at least it needs to point people in the right direction of where you can get that. So there should be no missing pieces. You should include all the necessary assets in your guide itself. And then finally, we have the deep end guide. This assumes high level of prior knowledge about your API or the stack. It lacks basic empathy for developers. And it provides absolutely minimal guidance. Like you can do it, you'll figure this out. I'm sure you'll figure this out. A good example of this is something like this. Before using an API, make sure you have an API key. For instructions on how to get one, please refer to a separate API documentation. Now, on the surface, this seems very reasonable. This is how probably 80% of the guides are, but it's the other 20%, and I think AssemblyAI does this really well, is that they give you a temporary API key. Now, granted, your product should be able to support that, but if you look at it from a developer point of view, start from what the developer is doing, this is a great example of getting someone started. You've already given them the API key, and if I'm enjoying it, I can come back and I can extend that API key. In fact, I think there's not even an account that I need to open to start with AssemblyAI. So the lesson here is that you should remove all the hurdles, essentially, to get developers started. So, just to recap, you should have clear objective and scope. It should be very clear what I'm going to accomplish with this guide. One guide should be one objective. They should not be trying to do too many things. You should provide contextual use cases that will get developers excited about it. And then you should clarify the code placement and the file structure for your guides. You should include all the necessary assets, be it demo data, stats, audio clips, whatever. And then finally, you should remove all the hurdles from your quick start guides. This, I think, is the ultimate goal. You want to make it so easy that they cannot not try it. That should be the ultimate aim to make your guides. Create that Netflix sort of feeling of like, oh, you know what, just one more episode. They want to hit that button. And they should be excited. They should be excited to dive in to your quick start guide. Now, I want to give you an example of something that I've been trying out. So I've been writing technical guides for a while now, and I found that I was searching for that hello world sort of examples all the time. Even though I was going to, if I'm playing around with Twilio SMS API, or if I'm playing around with AssemblyAI's audio API, I found that I was using the same snippets of code over and over again, and going to these portals sometimes is really fighting yourself, fighting through the maze of docs that you have now. So I started documenting some of that stuff for my own usage on a page that's really powered by Mentlify at this point, which is a document writing software. But I found that, and I started sharing this with a few friends, and I found that this was really helpful only because it was trying to do just one thing. It was a hello world experience of like, if I was to go and write these hello world pages for all of these APIs, this is how I would have done it. So this is an example for me mostly to emulate. Like if I was going here, I'll give you a quick demo of this. Right through this. Okay. So if I was writing the first Twilio SMS API, for example, this is how I would do it. I would get to the code first. Here it is. This one hasn't broken. Let me show you the recent email. Yeah, this is if I was trying to send an email using recent API, the thing I really care about.
It's not mirroring.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Yeah. So I have like a bunch of these examples here, but to drive the point home, if I was writing this hello world guide for writing an email, this is how I would do it. Like the developers want to know the code, I would give them the code. I'm also doing some best developer practices of giving them, like this is the way you should be loading your .env file, all your variables should be there. And then all I do now is I copy this code, bring it into my VS Code, and I'm ready to go. Is there anything that I need to know from just the hello world experience? It's on this page. So this is the kind of thing that I feel all guides should do. Now this is of course just a hello world example. You could have more complicated examples, but they should follow the same pattern of like they just want to do it because it's so easy and simple and basic for that example. All right. So, and this is the final question that I often ask myself, is that would I be excited if I was reading this? Now, generally, you would get the right answer if you are putting yourself in those shoes and really try to follow the guide. And I've done this myself. You're in time pressure and you just write the guide and you don't test it yourself. That is really the basic stuff that we often miss out. Follow that guide yourself and see how that makes you feel. If it's complicated for you, it probably is going to be more complicated for other people because you're already in the weeds. And if you don't get excited about it, other people will not get excited about it either. So, I want to leave you with that. I also want to say that Kunal, who's in the audience here, Kunal and I go back a long way, 10 years, and we have, after spending about 10 odd years in corporate, we have started our own thing, and that's HelloDX. And what we do at HelloDX is we do developer experience audits for companies. So we look at all of this onboarding experience and how we can help improve the developer experience and help you improve the way developers interact with your API. So if you want to take advantage of that, please take a picture of this or QR or whatever, and we would love to chat with you and help you through some of this stuff. Again, my name is Amit. I think I'm doing okay on time.
Yeah, plenty of time for questions.
Questions?
I'm going to run the mic back. It's a little better for hearing and accessibility, so we'll circle the mic around the room.
Thanks, Amit. I think I probably made all 6 of those mistakes, so let's just assume that I have all 6 of those out there. How do I figure out which of those to solve first? Which one will make the most impact?
That's a really good question. I think this might be a little subjective for different companies, but for me, if I'm not even getting to a point that I can explore the rest of your guide, like the introduction, I think is the most important thing. You need to get people excited about the guide. You literally have maybe 5 seconds. So that introduction should really set the part for what you are going to expect, what you will get out of this. And this happens a lot. I've done this so many times. It's so easy because you just want to get to the meat of it. As developers, we don't really want to write a lot of this introduction stuff. We just want to get to just the code stuff. Right? So that's what I would do.
You talked about removing hurdles, but things like test API keys are a pretty heavy lift for some product teams. So as technical writers, we might not always have control over that. What are some other examples of removing hurdles or things that we might have more control over for things like that?
Yeah, I mean, so just to talk about the API stuff, yeah, I completely agree that not a lot of companies would have that. But even if that's not an automated thing, you cannot give a 24-hour API key, you can at least point them to the process of getting that API key quickly. There should not be any wait. And let's remove this 2-week barrier that a lot of companies have. Just give a free plan so I never have to come back and talk to a salesperson. Please don't send random emails about like, hey, just following up. If I'm keen on it, I'm going to come back to it. But also the thing I talked about from the give them everything they need for the guide. I have played around with APIs where I've literally, only because I'm excited about the API, I've gone in and found the assets or built assets on my own. Like if you want me to use some images, give me the exact images, resolutions that I need. I'm not going to make any images. There's things like that. A lot of this comes down to like, have you really followed the guide on your own?
I've been at different companies where they get feedback from the users on the guides in a lot of different ways. And so outside of hiring you, that's number one. Can you talk a little bit about the approach you take to bringing in the users into the review process and constantly improving on the guides?
Yeah. So one of the things that we used to do at Amazon when I was on the Alexa team was that we would have these regular quarterly meetings where we would bring in our champions into the office, or just even do this virtually. We would try to understand what are the use cases they're trying to solve for, and if the guides or the assets that we have are actually serving that purpose. We found a lot of times that the product blogs that we were writing were written from a very product marketing speak point of view. They were not really catering to the kind of things that developers are actually doing on the ground. So having those kinds of meetings definitely helps. It can drive the kind of content you want to do, and also if you have like 5 getting started guides and still not solving the problem, there's something wrong in that also. You can also do some sort of feedback on the guides themselves, because at the end of the day, you should also have some metrics that you're using to drive the guides are actually working or not. If you have a good getting started guide, but your adoption rates are still pretty low, or you're seeing drop-offs on those pages, that's a good indication that something needs to change.
Thank you.
This is a great talk, lots of insightful information, thanks so much. And I also follow you immediately, sounds like a cool guy to follow. Folks also don't hesitate to follow. The question about kind of piggybacking on the hurdles and stuff like that, what's your take on automate or not automate certain steps? Because guides can be, even for simple things, if you're running some of the complex projects, distributed databases or whatnot, you might end up in a situation where the guide can be quite long, even though it's like a hello world. What's your take, advice on automating certain steps? Kind of like, okay, so there's some boilerplate, you need to run multiple nodes in Docker Compose, blah, blah, blah. versus telling them you need to do them themselves and make them go through the pain. I'm personally against the pain, so I'm trying to automate as much as I can, but where I should stop automating things and let them, go through the things so they can get the example faster.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. So I want to share an example of a company called LaunchDarkly, which does feature flagging. I don't know if anyone's here from LaunchDarkly, but Kunal and I were just playing around with that recently, and they have an interesting approach where you first sign up, and they give you this sort of a walkthrough sort of thing. So I'm not touching code, I'm not doing any of that, but even that quick walkthrough walks you through a CLI command line sort of experience. They give you an API key, and then you go and do some stuff on the CLI, and you make that first API call. So there's not like a longish guide, but if you were to write a guide on that, that would probably be a longish process for them. So they give you a taste of that, and then they start to get you into that. Okay, so if you wanted to do this using Python from scratch, then they have like other ways of doing this, which gets you into that guide experience. So I'm not saying that you absolutely need to simplify everything down into a quick start guide. But the general premise is still that you should make it something that people want to follow, and they get excited by that, just hitting the next, okay, I get this, what's next, sort of thing. So it could be even a video guide that you have. But the point is that when the people start really getting into building something, you have a guide or sort of like a template. Boilerplates are fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with the boilerplates. As long as you're setting context for what the boilerplate can and cannot do.
Yeah, boilerplate, scaffolding, kind of like code generation.
Absolutely, I think those are great ways of doing it. As long as you set the expectations that this is what the boilerplate can do, and this is a good start. Like Rails is a great example of that. Like, you have boilerplate scaffolding already set up, but you know what the limitations are, and you know what you can and cannot do. So that's totally fine, yeah?
Totally writing on the last comment. Great talk. Great talk, very, very useful, and I think it would be great to learn a lot more from the basic how-to sort of, page you have, or the collection of good guides. My question is around very similarly, like compared to databases, maybe in the AI ML space. Like what a lot of companies do is like they'll actually give you a Python notebook and like send you to Colab and like expect you to run the whole thing on a free Colab account. Where there's definitely a lot of lift around doing something heavy, like maybe it's fine tuning. That was the last one I saw. How do you account for things like that, where there's definitely like, it's not just an API key you might have some compute resources involved, like something where it's a bit more of a lift. And that's like, I guess, where the vast majority of the content I'm kind of familiar with. So I'm trying to think about like the hello world in that perspective.
Yeah. Are you like doing a lot of documentation on the Jupyter notebooks themselves, or sort of that environment?
Yeah, we have ways to do that, and none of them are pretty here, but.
Okay, so I've seen some of that also happen. I've seen like people getting pointed to GitHub repos and directly just copy the code from there, or go to this Colab and all of that. What I find often is that there's no cohesive step-by-step process for that even. It's very ad hoc. It's as if like one engineer got on board and was like, I'm just gonna do this, and this is where we're gonna start pointing people to. So there's no strategy around it, and oftentimes that just get abandoned. Nobody is maintaining that. So as long as there is a strategy for that and you're maintaining it, I'm okay with the guide being like a commented sort of Colab thing. As long as there is like, you're backing it up over a longer period of time, that's fine.
More questions, anyone?
Yeah, my question's around what your opinions are on guides that sort of build on previous guides versus like a series, versus just having them all be standalone. What your thoughts are there?
I've done both. I generally enjoy, this is a personal opinion, I generally enjoy going from 0 to 1, sort of things which are not piggybacking on anything else, but there are absolutely use cases where you want to educate developers on a certain track, like an educated course of sorts. That's in the last one we built this, so in this one we're gonna add on to that. So taking Twilio example, this is the SMS example, in this one we're gonna build voice call on top of that. Again, as long as they are, it's very clear that you have, these are the prereqs for that. So, and here is the other guide. You should follow this one, or you can also follow this one completely, which is the approach I like. I want to see that this is a guide all inclusive that will let me make that phone call. So I don't like dependency on another guide that I have to go to another guide and get the code from that one first just to get this one that I'm more excited about. So I like it to be contained because the purpose of the Quick Start Guide is not to give you production code. The purpose is to educate you and then get you excited about the thing that you want to build. So I don't want to handhold completely that you can build this entire monolith in this one simple guide. But I'm okay with them getting connected, but they should also be like contained that I can use them individually also.
Great. Anything else? We have time for maybe one more? Yep.
Yeah, so building on that last question, the Quick Start Guide, what audience should this be written to? Beginner, intermediate, expert? Because you want beginners to feel like there's information for them, but then you don't want to bore the people. I already know all that. This isn't a Quick Start Guide. I'm already bored.
Yeah, I mean, there's some, even if I say that, it should be for beginners or it should be advanced, it's going to vary so much. It's going to be all relative. For someone, Python may be a new thing. For someone, like a really very advanced topic could be like, oh, I know this ML stuff, like why are you getting in a one-on-one with me? So it's about it. You have to know a little bit about the audience, what kind of audience you are trying to reach out to. But don't make assumptions about, everyone would know this. I think we all have the curse of knowledge.
That was my second question.
We have the curse of knowledge. We assume that what we know, everybody else knows. So one of them is just to be wary of that, which is like, and not to beat our own trumpet, but this is where having a fresh pair of eyes look at your stuff can really help, because we don't have any biases, we don't have any political leanings that companies often have internally. So having like some fresh pair of eyes definitely helps, but just being aware that, question it, that do people know about this buzzword that I'm throwing in here?
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for your questions. Can we get another round of applause?